Art, economics, Russia. When observing Dr. Dirk Boll's admirable background, two words come to mind: money laundering. In between publishing various books and publications on art history and iconic collections and his professorship for art management at the University of Hamburg, he is here to welcome us as president of Christie's in Europe, Middle East, Russia, and India.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to St. James's, a warm welcome to Christie's. We are delighted to partner with the Dubai event, which is a non-commercial platform, very exciting for us, being an entirely commercial platform, apart from the fact that we see ourselves as a thread in the cultural fabric and therefore have a great interest in educating, exchanging information, and hosting a platform that has actually been created to bring together everybody who has an interest in interesting watches. So from the maker to the blogger, from the expert to the collector, this is the place to meet, to exchange views and ideas. We are delighted to share you. We are delighted to have been your partner for the past 3 years and to host you here in your first international platform, if we may say so, because we all know that Dubai is a very international place. Here you are at the home of Christie's, 252 years now in St. James's, not only celebrating Christie's here, but also the great tradition of watchmaking in the UK. So may your platform be inspired by the place. Welcome. Good morning.
Malika Yazjerdi is the kind of person that is only happy when her opponent in an argument gets their facts right, just so she can rewrite them for him. Like a true marketer, she has the gift of storytelling and would rather wear a miniature sundial on her wrist if only she could find one. As the Senior Marketing and Communications Director at Seddiqi Holding and Director of Dubai Watch Week, she wanted more from the watch industry. And here we are, at the first International Horology Forum, London, 2018.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to have all of you here with us today for the first international chapter of the Horology Forum. Dubai Watch Week is a testament to when you have shared values, shared vision, and commitment in excellence, dreams come true. We started talking about Dubai Watch Week 4.5 years ago, and here we are today in London, in the historical landmark and dedication of people that have been coming together over centuries to make beautiful timepieces. Christie's has been supporting us in that shared value and vision, and without great partners, without great journalists, great audience, great speakers and moderators, our dreams would not come true. I'm not going to bore you with the details of the Horology Forum. Dominic has got some interesting conversation pieces to introduce each one of our speakers and panelists today. So without further ado, I'll hand over the floor to her. You're at her mercy for the next 2 days, so good luck with that. And I hope you enjoyed the rest of this morning. Thank you.
Mohammed Seddiqi, Chief Commercial Officer of Seddiqi Holding, a watchful, no pun intended, encyclopedia by all means. He is a trailblazer in the world of horology in the retail sector. So if you'd like to take a seat. Our moderator, a digital savant, riling up the way things are done, is Suzanne Wong, editor-at-large for Revolution International, while avidly banging her gavel on the jury of the GPHG. A fervent collector and constant seeker of knowledge in creative and artisanal industries, Hamdan El-Hudaydi is the student and patron our watchmakers keep creating for. Aldis Hodge, let me get back up here. Aldis Hodge, a true example of how there is no allocated time or place for a dream to be pursued, has lunged into the watch industry all hands on deck amidst his career in acting and painting. Founder of Basil Timepiece, perhaps he can lend a fresh viewpoint to his fellow speakers.
So, welcome everybody in the room and also our friends online to the very first International Horology Forum, jointly hosted by the excellent folks at Dubai Watch Week and also Christie's. It's a great day out here in central London, but I promise you the action here is going to be hot as fire. So, the topic that we're going to be sinking our teeth in today goes by the extremely sexy title, Battle of the Soothsayers, given that the only reliable prediction of the future is, well, time. Time, only time, as they say, will tell. So let's kick off the discussion by going a bit into our panelists' experience with locating, placing mechanical timepieces in the digital age. How do you personally and the people around you feel about this traditional mechanical object in the 21st century lifestyles? We can start with Mohammed, perhaps, and kind of work our way around.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending the Dubai Watch Week panels. What is time? You know, today people look at a watch or a device to give time, but who actually does look at a watch to know time? We have our iPhones, we have the watch in the cars, we have time is everywhere. But what really matters today with the mechanical piece is that it is a piece of art that we carry with us, and it's a sentimental value, whether it's passed through from one generation to another, or a watchmaker who spent years and months developing something and realizing and coming up to the end conclusion of a watch. So is really a watch a device to say time, or is it a piece of art on our wrist? That is the question, and I believe that is the way we have to perceive a watch, not as an accessory for us to wear, but more as a piece of art that we have to appreciate and look after it for the next generation.
Is that how the people around you feel about it as well, when you speak to them, when you explain to them your passion for timepieces, especially, you know, amongst your family and your friends?
I think it's changing. I think people are looking more and more into watches as a piece of art rather than as a device only. And with the help and the support we're getting by doing the Dubai Watch Week, people, especially in the Middle East region, people are appreciating a watch more than what they used to do 10 or 15 years ago, where it was an accessory with, normally it was with diamonds, but now you see people are looking more into having watches with a piece of history in it, an old dial, a mechanical breakthrough, something that would give them that extra mile or something to talk about. So people are appreciating it in a much better way than what they used to do a few years ago.
I especially appreciate what you said a bit earlier about comparing it to a piece of art, because essentially what it is a piece of someone's creative process on your wrist. It's really part of someone's life in that way. How do you feel about it, Hamdan?
First of all, I would like to thank everyone for attending and making us participate in this forum. My point of view and opinion, now, of course, the smart watches or smart intelligence watches will evolve our lifestyle some way, but it cannot be compared to a mechanical watch. A mechanical watch today is done by a watchmaker who's an artist, as I mentioned, a physicist, a painter, a sculptor, and an engineer who crafts this piece with passion and love.
Exactly.
You know,
a fine example being the piece on your own wrist.
Thank you very much. And for this outcome, you know, and it would last for a decade, 2, 3, or a century. Well, this smart gadget, there will not be an emotional bond. Eventually, you will have to replace as technology goes on.
Yeah.
Well, as a mechanical watch will always stay for a century to a decade. As we've seen, we see, and we will see.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Aldis, how about your take on this?
Good morning, everybody. Bonjour, ça va? To piggyback on what Mohammed and Hamdan said, I completely agree in that with watchmaking, you're buying something that can help substantiate the idea of legacy, right? I can appreciate from the idea of the digital age. It took me a long time to find some sort of appreciation for the digital watches, but the fact that people are still buying them says to me they're still interested in the idea of a watch. Now, some people say, well, you know, why do I need a watch to tell time? I can do that on my phone. If that's the case, why buy a digital watch? The idea of it is substantiated. It's more of an experience, right? If you want an elevated experience, you're going to go to the foundation, which is a mechanical watch. Because as I was explaining yesterday, for me, it's not about telling time so much as it's about how you tell time. I do want something that is going to last me 50, 100, 200 years to help tell the story of my legacy versus something that will have to be replaced in 1 or 2 years. I want something that is going to represent my idea of class, culture, and eloquence. And when I buy a watch for a very particular reason, it is for just that, to represent these things about me, you know. There's a very big difference in the representation of wearing, you know, say a Grubel Forcé. When I see that, I'm like, you know. It's about, if you know them, I know that you have a very keen eye in terms of class and taste, right?
Yeah.
You have a very selective idea of choice. And then it says something so very specific and unique about you that it makes me interested in you in a very different way. I want to know your story, your experience. What got you to the point where, you know, this particular piece came across your desk, because we are making functional mechanical pieces of art.
Absolutely.
You know,
shout out to our friends in the room, by the way.
Well, you know, it's like, look, you can buy a Monet, you can buy a Picasso, and that's great, but you can also have one on your wrist that you can take around with you everywhere you go.
Exactly. It's a bit difficult to wear a painting on your wrist, shall we say. It's not exactly the most convenient thing to cart around. I really appreciate what you said about it being kind of an expression of self-identity. I want to dig into that a bit more, because we had a conversation yesterday, Hamdan, when we were sort of in the front row during John's presentation, about the objects that, you know, they occupy the real estate of mechanical watches, and how digital watches, in terms of when people talk about the threat that they pose to mechanical watches, they don't replace them at all as objects, but they do take the same space that they do. And once they do, like, you know, there's only certain, you have 2 wrists, let's put it this way. And once you've got something on there, you know, there isn't space for something else. So I want to ask you guys about, like, sort of the modern generation of digital natives that, you know, you come across in your life as, like, you know, young people in the prime of life. And what modern objects do you think replace or attempt to replace the wristwatch in our lives, and to what extent do you think they succeed? Maybe, Hamdan, we can start with you.
A smart watch, maybe the younger generation would want to experience a smartwatch. But they will always look at the surrounding. They look at their elder brothers, their fathers, and they would eventually want to be different in a way. This won't make them different. You know, having a smartwatch on the wrist, they would not experience the weight for a piece or for an art piece. Like I said, different watchmakers with different personalities, limitless abilities, would give out different results and different beautiful pieces. that they will eventually want to own and have those. Will want to have a wristwatch on their hand one day, and they will have to experience the wait for a piece eventually if they could not find it.
Yes, that's true. Aldis, you hang out with a lot of young, cool people in the course of your day job.
Those young whippersnappers.
Well, yourself being one of them, of course. When you do speak to them, like people in your circle, people that you encounter in your daily life, like how do they react when you start to communicate about your passion of mechanical watches?
Well, I'm quite enthusiastic about my passion. Most people think that I'm simply a collector, and then I'm like, no, I design watches. Okay, cool. And then I'm actively, trying to develop watches. They're like, oh, this is not so much of a hobby. I'm like, no, it's not a hobby. I stay up to 6 o'clock in the morning drawing watches. Like, this is what I do. Mm-hmm. What I realize when I speak to people is a lot of times maybe the novice self-proclaimed collector or someone who doesn't understand the value or proclivity of a watch, they don't understand how to appreciate a watch. Mm-hmm. And it's as simple as educating them. I've talked to so many people where, I explain the process, the time it takes, the difference between a massively produced watch versus a handmade watch, and the care that goes into it. And then I will get a call about a month later saying, you realize you're responsible for me now spending all of my free money on watches. I'm on all these websites. My wife is mad at me.
Yes.
I'm like,
you're welcome.
I'm not mad at that. I will take full responsibility, because it is about educating people, but in a way that's palatable. Because at the root of what we do, it is art, where art is bridged with science cohesively. And the scientific part is a little tough for people to get around. The physics, the metallurgy, the micromechanical engineering, and a lot of people don't understand that aspect. And then there's also the art, where a lot of people say, well, it's not an art that applies to me. But when you understand what goes into the art, what initiates the art, that passion is transferable to anything that you do, because Insane Club, because it is passion. You are devoting so much time and effort to this one thing, and your DNA is fully into it. Mm-hmm. Very synonymous again with painting, or if you want to make a fine car. But when people get to appreciate the passion, then that transpires and it transcends rather the idea of, well, why do I need it? Why this? Why that? Oh, I understand why, because I can respect it. Yeah. And there's a younger generation that doesn't understand necessarily why, but then when they realize it's more about inclusive representation of a very specific thing about you, they begin to start seeking what that specific thing is, and then they go find their watch,
It's interesting what you say about, that kind of passionate, invested relationship that you have with a mechanical watch that perhaps you might not share with a smart watch or a personal device like that. Mohammed, as, kind of the leader, well, one of the leading voices in international retail for watches. You speak to young people, and I know that you are passionate and committed to spreading the word amongst the younger generation of the charm and the attraction of a mechanical timepiece. When you speak to the younger generation about their personal devices and their smart objects or whatever, do you get the sense that it's easy to transmit that kind of passion and affection and committed relationship that you would have with a watch, for example?
Well, commenting back to what Hamdan said about digital watches and the younger generation is, and I always remember this, it was at the first Dubai Watch Week we had a couple of years ago in Dubai when Mr. Beaver said that he's not threatened by the digital watch coming into the market, whereas they're helping the watch industry by making people getting used to wearing a watch. And I believe that was a very well said statement from Mr. Beaver, who's considered as a marketing guru in the watch industry today. Mm-hmm. Looking at the young generation and how they are connected the whole time on social media, whether it's Instagram or Snapchat or whatever else. I'm not on any of them, so I'm away from all of this. And seeing the younger generation now that they are looking and asking about digital watches. Not necessarily something expensive, but they start, for example, I'm talking about young, really young kids that are asking about the Alec Monopoly watch, for example, or asking about the digital smartwatch from Hublot, which is a gateway to starting loving something specific. A lot of the younger generation were talking about a watch which we might all think it was something crazy, which was from Moser, the Swiss Alp watch, which was the only mechanical watch with one function, which is giving time. So we see that people or the younger generation are tending and looking and reading and asking more about the watch industry than ever before. I see that with my kids, with my nephews, with the young generations around us. I'm talking about very young generation. So it is something that is growing. Auction houses are helping because are flying vintage watches. Talking about the auction where they sold the Paul Newman with a crazy price of $17 million for a watch that is made out of steel 40 years ago. Who would think about it? And at that time, maybe it was, what, $2,000?
Yes. But do you necessarily feel that the purchaser of that watch is really a fan of mechanical watchmaking, or really sort of the value of the watch as a sentimental object linked to the person? You see what I mean?
I remember once a big collector told me that a watch is like a painting in terms of being a piece of art. So the case of the watch is always considered as the frame, and the dial and the movement is considered as the piece of art. And if you take the square centimeter of a watch compared to a Picasso or a Monet or something, the average is more expensive of a watch. Wow. So it is a piece of art, and we have to look what is the content of the watch rather than what is outside. In terms of the sentimental value or having really mechanical value, I think really it depends from one watch to another. The Paul Newman watch obviously has a historic reason behind it. It's an iconic piece. Any collector would want to have a Paul Newman watch in his or her collection. A very basic mechanical watch, a chronograph without a date, but historically it is considered as the most iconic watch in our modern world.
While we're on the subject, I want to sort of focus a bit more what you just said a bit earlier about bringing value to the life of like the person who's actually wearing it. What unique value can we actually communicate to people who are, you know, looking to buy a mechanical timepiece? And the key word here is unique. What does a mechanical watch do for a person's life that makes it objectively better in a way that another object wouldn't?
Satisfaction. It feels good to have a mechanical watch. It feels good. Yeah. Right? So honestly, it does feel good. And I was just telling some of the friends here that I sleep with my watch. And I like to put my watch under my ear and just listen to tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock.
I think all of us here in this room can appreciate the level of intimacy that Mohammed is sharing with us right now. What do you guys think? Do you have that?
You know, for me, a watch was always indicative of representation. When I started, and some of you know the story, but when I started very young, times were a little rough. You know, my family we've been through a few things. You know, been homeless a few times. You know, but the mindset was I want to achieve. I want to be successful in whatever moniker that actually represents the idea of success. But with my mother, she often expressed to me that, you know, they can take everything in this world away from you except for what you know. So education was a tentpole in my house, right? So I was like, if I want it, I can make it. But then I also heard when I was young, the sign of a good businessman, good shoes, good suit, and a good watch. So to me, the shoes and the suit were easy. Getting the right watch took a little time. But it represented my story. It represented the idea of achievement, not necessarily financial, but cultural, systemic achievement. The idea that people looked at me and thought that I was supposed to be less than or be subpar, and I can disprove the theory. I think for so many other young people, the idea of getting a very specific watch, you know, when I get this promotion, I'm gonna get this, da da da, it's because it is tied to achievement, and that is a part of the legacy we pass down. And I think with what we can do is we can help to share that idea of what the representation of this work of art is, because so many of the things that we acquire, so many of the material things we acquire are material and or aesthetic representations of what we're trying to say. We wear clothes specifically to say something, you know, about ourselves. It's a language. Everything we have, everything we wear, everything we do without speaking actual words, it's a language that we're trying to transfer. So when you look at a watch, it's not so much about the financial value behind it, at least not for me. It's about the story, and I can tell you that story. When you ask me about my watch, I can tell you what exactly it took me to get to that point. I can tell you right now I'm wearing a Gerald Genta because he was one of the first people to inspire my idea of design, and I wear this out of respect and homage to him. You know, and that is a part of what got me on this seat today. So it means so much more to me than just having a fancy watch on my wrist. This is emotional. If I lost this, I would lose my mind. I'm going under every seat like, where did it go? But I think it's that much and more for so many collectors. And we also can transfer or inspire, incentivize a younger generation at a younger age to understand those values as well, because they're looking for it, you know. But the digital age is quick. It's immediate gratification. How can I get this now? Boom, bang, boom. This takes time. And regardless of how quickly we can access information, building that information, building that model of success takes time. It is the same value. And this will always represent that valuation to me. And I think we can also allow the younger generation, whether they're in the digital age, whether they're making their living off the digital age, they can use this as a representation of what it took to achieve that success.
I love the idea that you brought up, that you just spoke about actually, because we talk about quick fix, digital culture, how everything's very rapid cycle in that. Do you actually feel that, yes, this kind of inoculates minds against the values of watchmaking, which is traditional, or do you think that it creates a desire for that kind of value reversal because they're so saturated in it, they kind of want something different? Hamdan, you know, you've got a young family, like how do you plan to transmit this kind of desire to someone who's like your son?
They should learn how to appreciate, first of all, the work of the watchmaker, the effort the watchmaker or the artist did put in this piece, which is which we just, Mr. Mohammed mentioned. It's no less than having a, for instance, since Picasso is known by everyone, no less than having a Picasso on your wrist. So they will have to learn how to appreciate, and by learning who this artist is, and how long did this outcome take for this beautiful result. They will have to learn how to appreciate, and once they know how to appreciate, they would want and wish to have this, this piece.
The example you shared with us a bit earlier, Aldis, about, you know, telling your friends about and kind of like infecting them almost with this kind of passion and them kind of like, like, you know, cussing you out for it. How has your experience sharing, have you had a similar experience sharing this with friends, like sort of inducting them, bringing them into this world, like, which you're so passionate about?
Of the mechanical watches?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
And do you get the same reaction?
Yes, of course. They would love to. Like, who does not, like my generation loves the mechanical watches, but everyone would want to experience the smartwatches or the digital watches. But this generation, even though they experience, they would go back to the mechanical watches. The younger generation would experience, but they will eventually want to upgrade. They would want to upgrade to a mechanical watch.
What about you, Mohammed? Do you have a particular example of someone that
Mohammed said regarding Hublot, the digital watch.
Yeah.
Mohammed, it will eventually stop updating, right?
Yes.
They will have to go to a new one because it stopped updating. They will either go to a new one, or they will jump to the mechanical watch.
Or they will force people to exchange it for a new mechanical watch.
Yes.
Well, I think that's the
temporary
idea.
value.
Yes, that's the idea.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite example you want to share with us of someone that you've been very happy to sort of induct and sort of bring into this community of the love of mechanical watches?
Well, there are many. You know, being in the retail industry, selling watches, we saw a lot of changes where people changed from no watch to a digital watch to being collectors, I would say. And I would say the trend is not only because of what we are giving them as retailers or as what we are doing by Dubai Watch Week or by what the watch brands are doing. It's a help with the bloggers, it's the help with the media, it's a help of a little bit of everyone for people to realize what is a watch, why to have a watch, what are the values of a watch. So it's a joint effort. Without the watchmakers, we don't have nice watches. Without the media and the bloggers and all the social media, we won't have the coverage. Without us as retailers, we won't have the windows to show the clients the watches. And without us as watch lovers, there's no use of watches. So it's a support of everyone for us to reach where we are today. And we've seen a lot of people that changed hands from a digital watch, whether it's because of the battery, whether it's because they're always connected and they just want to be disconnected, whether it's appreciating more a mechanical timepiece because of its looks, because of its details, but it starts somewhere, always. And we see that it's growing more and more. We are suffering today with a small global crisis, which no one is mentioning about, but we see it. But I can see in the watch industry, well, at least in Dubai, we see that people are still interested regardless of the crisis. Okay, they're not spending as much as they used to, but people are investing in watches more and more. So it is there and people are liking it more. And they're going for it. We had some situations where we saw clients wearing two watches, a mechanical watch and a digital watch. I have an example of my uncle who wears only two mechanical watches, no digital watches, because he likes it and he appreciates it. People who are connected would still have the digital watch to have their steps, their heartbeat, whatever details they want about their health. But if you think about it, 10 years ago, we still had a heartbeat, we still were healthy, and we were still doing whatever we were doing without having it monitored or followed by a wristwatch. So why not do it still?
I love that you've taken the discussion into slightly controversial territories. The fact that you mentioned that no one's talking about the crisis of the market situation. I think that's cool. I want to keep on that because up till now we've been talking about how to maintain the relevance of this industry to audiences. And what Aldis and I were talking about a bit earlier is actually opening up the discussion to new audiences and new markets and like areas of the demographic, the watch buying demographic that we haven't really discussed before. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but this being the opening panel of the International Horology Forum, I believe 5 years ago, a panel like this would be exclusively white and male. And as you can see, that's not necessarily the case right now. And, or maybe I need to get my eyes checked, but not from where I'm sitting anyway. So yes, let's talk about new audiences and how to really make this relevant to them in an industry that so far has been dominated by particular voices. Anyone want to start?
Well,
Don't all rush.
Well, before I jump on that, I definitely want to piggyback on what you were saying about the crisis. I'm only 32, so when the quartz crisis came around, I'm not even sure I was here. But I feel like mechanical watchmaking is in a similar situation where the thought or fear was that the quartz era would destroy us. It forced us to look at what we did differently. It forced us to market differently and create a few things differently, take a few different paths, and innovate. And at the crux of what our main responsibility as watchmakers, innovators, we have to innovate. We're yet again challenged with that very same premise. We just have to innovate. And I look at this digital age the same way I look at the quartz age. I believe that we're definitely going to power through. You're going to see some new avenues being taken, but we're just going to innovate. And we will restructure the way people understand and see watchmaking. And we can all flourish. The digital will stick around for a while, but I think, as Hamdan said, it will get to a point where people's interests will grow to evolve and say, okay, this is cool, but where's the basic foundation of it? Because humans are naturally curious and we always want to get back to center. And how do we get back to this thing that created or started X, Y, and Z, right? So I feel no fear. I feel excitement about the challenge to innovate, and now we have to do a little extra homework. That's fun. But that's our jobs initially. And then that goes further into the idea of marketing and speaking to new audiences, maybe some audiences that haven't been acknowledged particularly. In my experience, when I first started getting into watchmaking, I felt like the female audience wasn't acknowledged well because oftentimes there was the idea in terms of marketing that women were not as competent to understand mechanical watchmaking, right? I never saw the marketing skewed towards women. When for me, a lot of my contacts in the business who actually helped bring me in were women. I'm like, where's the complication? Where's the ladies' complication that's, this, that, and the other? And then over the years, I saw that it was increasing a little bit more, the voice, the outreach, the acknowledgement of women. And I appreciate that because there's an entire deficit there of attention being paid. There's a monopoly of opportunity in every avenue. And I think it always comes down to how do we target the audience that we don't see yet? Because everybody pays attention. Look, I'm a little boy who was raised in New Jersey, all right? I was in Trenton, in the back, the worst of the worst, and then went to Hackensack, which was, great. But still, nobody was targeting me, but my interest was there. And it eventually turned from a passion to a job to now obligation to help build out that passion and share it. But my interest was always there. There are so many people who have that interest, whether they have the means or not. And we have to figure out, how do we reach that buyer? How do we reach that member who could be our potential next great, the next George Daniels or the next Breguet or the next Roger Smith? Like, how do we reach that person who is interested but doesn't realize that we acknowledge them or that we see them? And that comes down to the marketing.
I think that's super relevant because now that we've thrown the doors open on this topic, representation, I'm going to ask you guys, I'm going to put you on the spot right now and say, what do you think that we could really change about the stories that we're telling about watchmaking? Who's doing a good job of it? I'm not going to say who's doing a bad job of it, because I'm not going to break anyone's, give anyone a hard time about this. So yeah, why don't we start off with Mohammed? Who do you think is doing a good job of speaking to new audiences in that representative way that Aldis just brought up?
Richard Mille.
Mm-hmm. In what way?
He's out. Everyone knows Richard Mille today. He introduced a product that is recognizable. He targeted people in the sport industry, not necessarily the number ones, but people who are very much related to the brand. And he's been everywhere. He started the brand, and I remember meeting Richard Mille with my father and my uncle in 1999 or 2000 in Basel, and both my father and uncle told him, "You're crazy to do a watch at this price." And at that time, it was the RM1 it was maybe at around today's price, 120,000 Swiss francs. And today you get a basic watch more expensive than that. He just targeted specific audience. And today, even the younger generation, you would see people wearing fake Richard Milles because of the iconic design and because of how Richard developed the brand and made it reach where it is today. He produces 4,000 watches a year. It's nothing for the whole world. But everyone is talking about it. People start conversations with Richard Mille. People love the design. He's using different materials in terms of cases, in terms of the mechanism. It's made of different cases. He is marketing it right. He is talking about it. He is sharing it with the people. People know him. So even though he's not a watchmaker, he's a purely design person, but he created a brand with passion, with love, and by passing
the way he really a new kind of watch market as something to serve.
Yes. We see that the trend of people who are buying Richard Mille watches are not the people who are buying a Patek Philippe or any classic watch. Exactly. It's a totally different way of looking at it.
But that's not to say that the guy who's buying a Patek isn't going to buy a Richard Mille as well.
Not necessarily. No. I'm not saying that, but it's a totally different way of thinking, I would say. A person who buys a first watch as a Richard Mille, try to convince him to buy a Patek, very difficult. But the person who has a Patek Philippe to buy a Richard Mille for the sake of having one Richard Mille in his collection, easy.
Just to complete the set.
Yes, but a person who got used to wearing a Richard Mille, being light, being sporty, being colorful, tell him to wear a Patek Philippe Calatrava. It's my grandfather's watch. But he wouldn't look into the details in the watch because he's more following a certain trend. But again, coming to the point that you mentioned, that the way Richard Mille benchmarked his product was in a very smart way. And people started talking. And after Richard Mille, after the millennium, we saw a lot of small brands coming up. I wouldn't say in the same way as Richard Mille, but with an evolution in the watch industry, with new ways of telling time, with the new materials used, with always something different. But that was where he started, and it took him a good 5 to 7 years to take off. But he believed in his brand and he worked on it hard, and people know him by name. And again, I will come back and say that he's not a watchmaker. Yes. So imagine we have a watchmaker that is able to do that as an artist or a creator. What would happen? I think...
yeah, if you could sort of apply this to more approaches. As a collector yourself, Hamdan, I mean, you're wearing something that is at the same time extremely classic and traditional in terms of its construction and the skill set, but it's also very avant-garde in the way it presents itself aesthetically. So how do you see yourself as a collector in those categories that Mohammed just talked about?
Contemporary and traditional. For instance, Global 4C is contemporary art, and Roger Smith is traditional. You know, and this type of this kind of work is contemporary, you know, with a traditional touch. But when you see Roger Smith's work, it's beautiful tradition with a very high bar. You know, that I did not see yet any watchmaker from the traditional aspect in this level. So I see myself as traditional contemporary.
Purely as someone who, you know, actually goes out there and buys watches, spends money on them, you know, kind of following on the same question I asked Mohammed, who do you think is doing a good job of speaking to you at the moment? Not necessarily in terms of the products they have, but in terms of their communication, what they represent, and what do you think they add to you? Who do you think is doing a really good job of that?
I have met many watchmakers, artists, and all of them are amazing. But I've been contacting recently, maybe because of my interest, in their product or their pieces. It was always easy to speak to Group Al-Forsi, and always easy to get the information to convince me in my missing gaps, and the same with Roger Smith as well. It has always been easy with them. Maybe because lately, like, I'm in this direction, but I have tried the past 5-6 years. The easiest communication until now, it was with the Group Al-Forsi and Roger Smith in the sense of knowledge, exchanging knowledge and knowing, answering my question, the question I wanted an answer for.
A bit earlier, we brought up the example of the Moser, actually. Edouard, how's it going? And we talked about the importance of telling these stories in a new and fresh kind of way. Aldis, as an actor, you really sort of understand the importance of storytelling and engaging with your audience in that specific way. So who, like, not as a buyer, someone that you would necessarily, like, speaking from your perspective of a watch that you actually buy and put on your wrist, but who do you think tells the best stories right now in terms of watch communication, how they market themselves? Who grabs people?
You gonna put me on the spot?
I did.
I do not want to be in this seat right now.
It's getting hot.
Let me see, who's telling the best stories? It's tough because I think that a lot of great brands are telling really fine stories mechanically, right? What I think would be fantastic would be to see the actual human side a little bit more. What these watchmakers go through to get to that product. The family life, the sacrifice, not making a reality show of it, but you know, showing, you know, I spent 3-4 years or whatever sleeping on a couch, using every penny I had just to make this one, you know, piece, this bridge, this balance wheel, this main plate or whatever, just to fund the dream. I think giving an audience a more in-depth look at what that is would help them to understand what this is that we do. Again, like I said, there are a lot of grand companies that are telling the stories mechanically and commercially quite well.
Do you have an example for us?
You say what?
Do you have an example for us?
Example. I dare to say, I would agree that, you know, Richard Mille, I would definitely agree with you there, Mohammed. Richard Mille does, he has created a new idea of, I guess, the cool factor.
Richard, I hope you're watching this, by the way.
But, you know, for me, there are brands that speak to me definitively because of innovation, right? And I meet a lot of people who may not be watch collectors, but understand the innovative aspect of design. You know, I do think that what started my career path in terms of looking at design and trying to figure out how to design well, I can thank Group Al-Forsi for that inspiration because of the way they took something, you know, the tourbillon, the way they took that and reformatted it in a very contemporary way. And when you look at it, you know for certain you're looking at a piece of art. So whatever they do or have done, when you look at the piece, you know it's transcribing the idea of art, you know. I think Kari Vutlenin does a really fantastic job of composition, really fine work. I think Hamdan, you're definitely right in that Roger Smith has elevated the bar of what I call it's very classic. It's not boring.
No, yes, true.
You
Not
know,
boring, yeah.
you look at it and you're like, well, you know, I mean, why would you buy a watch? You look at that and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. You know, that's why? Okay, it makes sense. Because there's the attention to detail is insane, but you're also teaching. It's not just this is the bar and this is where I'm going to do, and you know, I mean, this is where I'm going to go and this is how far I will. This is what you know. Mm-hmm. This is the next level. This is what I'm teaching you. And there are several brands that teach which each piece that they put out. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm a particular fan of the Moser dials, you know, H. Moser dials. That teaches me something about color. I'm a painter as well. I'm always I'm very, very particular about certain hues and different tones, which is why, you know, John's speech yesterday was particularly interesting to me about colors, but it teaches me how to use color in different ways, mm-hmm. you know. So, you know, technologically, artistically, I think they're doing exceptional in those areas. Selfishly, mm-hmm. as a consumer, I just want to know more about the watchmaker and how they connect to me. There is The Watchmaker's Apprentice, which I definitely have, you know, the story between George Daniels and Roger Smith, because George Daniels was like, you know, he's the man. And then you're like, oh, wow. And you see a whole different side of the idea. Mm-hmm. And you're like, this is cool because now I know you and I have a more personal relationship. So I think we have a huge advantage as watchmakers and watch brands to give the audience synonymously along with our product, our essence, our soul, who we are as people.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot personally as a writer, as someone who talks about watches to people who read my magazine, presumably, is the difference between talking to a watch collector, someone like yourself who has a lot of knowledge and understands watches very well, and speaking to a watch buyer, because they're not necessarily the same thing. A watch collector is also a watch buyer, but the reverse doesn't always apply. Right. And do you find that, because we've been talking about brands such as Richard Mille, which has, you know, very strong communication, but it's also a very sort of niche sort of market for people who really understand what they're going for. And then you have brands like what we mentioned earlier, Hublot, who communicates in a more sort of robust way to a wide audience, and someone like Global Force or Voutilainen, which is really even more niche. We're going to really sort of points of communication right here. Why do you think that the message sort of splits that way? It diverges between when we're talking to a watch collector versus when we're talking to a watch buyer. Shouldn't they really appreciate the same things? And do you find that, Hamdan, as a watch collector, the message needs to be really quite radically different?
A watch buyer today could, the first watches he would buy if he did not have a collection are known. Mm-hmm. Brands are known. He would not go, because at the beginning and the end, when he wants to buy a watch, it's definitely to represent him. So he would go for the known watches, or the watches that people know the most. He would not go for Volantinin, Kari, mm-hmm. or he would not go for Dufour or mm-hmm. Richard Smith, Roger Smith. So, because this is independent watchmaking that he will have to understand, other than being a buyer. So only people who understands or will have the knowledge would go into independent watchmaking. But a buyer would definitely go for the known brands, which are the common brands in the market, I believe.
Yeah. What's your take on this, Mohammed? Like because you speak to watch buyers as well as collectors all the time.
Well, people start as watch buyers and end up, if they like what they're getting into, they become hopefully collectors.
Do you have a magic formula for making this conversion? Trade secrets alert. Spilling secrets
yes,
here.
we give them some drinks in the shop with some magic potion to become collectors. No, I'm joking.
Wave it around.
I think it's a matter of self-educating, reading about the different brands and how they started and how they reached to what they're doing. Funny talking about this, I met one of our dear friends and the collector today who came to me many years ago and wanted to buy one of the Opus series from Harry Winston. If I'm not mistaken, it was the Opus 3, which was delayed and delayed and delayed. And it was his first watch to buy. So he started the opposite way around,
Yes.
And I was really impressed by this gentleman because when I told him, why don't you go for a Patek Philippe? He said it's a commercial piece. So I told him, read about it, know the history. I didn't tell him that what you're taking now in terms of the Bethune or Moser or the Opus series or MBNF are wrong. They're more than right. But you have to know the history of watches. Where did they come from? How did they start? Traditional watchmakers and everything. And today he's still one of the biggest watch collectors, I can say, in Dubai, and I'm sure Hamdan knows him. He's a common friend. But the way he started, and I remember also another watch that I showed him, which was a Richard Mille, the Nadal, the first one, and he saw it and he said, wow, it's a beautiful watch. How much is it for? And I told him the price. He said, I'm going to sell my house to buy this watch. So it was that extreme for a watch buyer to jump into these kind of conclusions. But
I hope he found a less extreme way to acquire the watch, by the way.
Yes, he did. So he started reading more about watches. He met a lot of the watchmakers, and he's helped a lot of people to understand what is a watch. Because of his passion for watches. It's not because I told him, listen, do this, I'm going to pay you or something, or he loves it. And it started all, I would say, thanks to Max Busser for the introduction of the Opus series, where he made, or he gave the opportunity for a lot of people in the watch industry to come out and be known to the world. And it started with the Opus, and then with MBNF, he continued what he used to do with the Opus series, and he's doing a great success. Not in terms of only the brand MBNF, but for the watch industry.
As a whole.
People are coming out, and not only now in watches, but also in art. People who are sitting, hiding in an apartment somewhere in Europe or in Far East, he finds them, commissions some art pieces, and he displays it to them, and he makes them famous.
I think that's a great example of the collector you brought up a bit earlier, that kind of, he went in the opposite direction of what you would expect. And it's a strong counterexample to illustrate how sometimes the success of a company and its message and its popularity can actually kind of work against it sometimes. And you too, as people who are on the receiving end of this kind of messaging, how do you feel about it? Do you feel that you want to demonstrate your knowledge and understanding of the industry more by going more towards brands like the independent brands that have a less strong messaging in that way?
I do read a lot about the independent watchmaking. I do invest as well in the independent watchmaking.
Do you have a favorite?
told
He's
you
looking
so.
around. Don't pretend. We see
Yes.
you.
There are a couple, to be honest. There are a couple of brands, not even in Europe. There's in Japan, we were discussing, there's Horology in Japan. He's as well an independent watchmaker with a very good work. So I do this as an analysis as well and a study to deliver the message I want to deliver, you know, in regards to the watchmaking and the independent watchmaking as well, and to deliver the message and deliver how different watchmakers with different personalities can give. You know, you can give out different pieces, different outcome. This is what I deeply read about and what I invest.
So given the example of maybe two watches which are equally good in terms of the mechanism, in terms of the design, in terms of, you know, the equal quality, basically, but one's from a more popular brand and one's from a more sort of independent niche brand, do you necessarily know which choice you'd make? Because you talk about, you know, expressing
Yes.
the values that are important to you in terms of asserting your identity and all that.
Of course, like between an important brand and a normal brand, which one would I choose, or what would I choose between, like in which?
Because, I mean, you seem to suggest that, you know, it's your something that you want to do very strongly is also to support independent brands and sort of give them that sort of recognition that maybe a bigger brand wouldn't necessarily need. So, you know, given that choice of an equally good watch, you know, you have two, but one's by a big brand and one's by an independent brand. Am I correct to say that you would choose to support the...
There's Charles Frodsham. Charles Frodsham is, they're starting their first wristwatch. They already produced a couple of pieces in the market, a beautiful time teller only. I believe, which I don't believe I've seen any out there, but this is one of the watches I would.
What about you?
Independent side.
Independent.
Yeah. So what about you, Aldis? What's your choice? You're in the hot seat.
Oh, I'm independent all day. Oh, yeah. I'm independent as it gets, you know, because the independent brands, the DNA represents me as I feel I am. You know, I've had to be, I've taken quite an avant-garde path in entertainment, and the same thing with watchmaking. So, you know, give me equivalent value, but you give me the choice between, you know, established name brand that's, you know, from a company 200 years old or something like that, or you give me Fiona Kruger or Struthers, I'm gonna go Kruger or Struthers, because not only does that represent innovation, but it also, to me, represents the future of where watchmaking is gonna go. I wanna invest in the future of watchmaking.
Yes.
Not to say that investing in an established brand is the alternative, but for me personally, you know, because purchases are so personal, I'm going to invest in how I see the moves are made and who's making those moves in a way that's, you know, representative of me. And again, I'm a weird guy, you know? I choose different things, and I love the fact that there's a freedom of thought. There seems to be more relevance to the freedom of innovation when it comes to independent brands.
Well, I like to think that all
Less
of us who
conformity.
appreciate and love mechanical watchmaking, we're a bit weird in a way, aren't we? I mean, we're kind of stubborn about things because we're like kind of clinging on to stuff that, well, I mean, it's obsolete, but I think at the same time, as we brought up earlier, it's still relevant. Mohammed, you kind of have like a dual perspective here as someone who sells watches, but also someone who personally enjoys and is passionate about them. So how do you kind of sort of balance that when you look at the products that come your way?
It's difficult.
Explain.
You know, we have a system in the company that we have always to give priority to our consumers, our collectors, our friends, and not to entertain ourselves. So it's difficult. especially when it comes to pieces that are rare, limited, special. We work closely with a lot of the brands that we represent to create Dubai editions or UAE editions, and we've been doing this since 2006.
Some of the most beautiful timepieces I've seen, by the way.
We have created more than 40 watches so far. And all these watches were born after the passion me and my cousins have together, and it's something that we always want and we cannot have, so we create this so that we have more pieces coming and we can purchase it. So,
see, that's the personal side coming in, like the watches that you really like it.
But then, you know, we always have a twist. So we've done watches with almost all the big brands, even with Patek Philippe and Audemars Piguet. We created special editions for Dubai. We have a lot of new watches coming in this year as well as next year. Crazy things. Hamdan is always one of our first clients who's looking at the crazy things we are working on. And recently we've been doing more and more with the independent brands because the personal touch we have with the brands, because the flexibility that they're giving us in terms of creating something together that is not existing in the collection but out of this world.
So 40 limited editions?
More than 40.
And how many different brands?
Of maybe 12 or 13 brands.
Okay. Guys, I'm going to open up the floor to Q&A in a bit, but you know, before we do that, maybe one final question for all our panelists. We can kind of keep rolling on this, because as technology, kind of bringing it back to the original sort of subject at hand, because technology will continue to evolve. There's, you know, you can't really hold that back. But kind of invested in making this happen. So what aspects of it do you think that we should continue to emphasize to sort of keep the relevance of watchmaking, mechanical watchmaking, fresh, even against evolving technology? What stays the same, even if everything else changes?
Let the watchmakers come out and show what they can do. I believe that it is the passing of knowledge to the people about the people hidden behind the walls that are creating these timepieces is important.
Openness, transparency.
Openness, exactly. And show people. Where did Patek Philippe start from? 177 years ago. They started 178 years ago. They started with two guys producing watches. And today these two people who created the brand do not exist, but the brand exists. Everyone knows Patek and Philippe because of their history and what they did. But today, we know a lot of the watch brands because of the name or the marketing behind it. But who is behind it? Who is creating the product? Who is doing the product? They're unknown to people. So I think that if people know who is doing the products, they would appreciate the products even more.
That's really interesting, because I kind of see like a parallel with something that we're seeing a lot of in technology, by the way. You're talking about open source information, like really sort of breaking that down so that it becomes something that everyone has access to, things that people should know and people should understand, because the more you understand something, obviously the more you can appreciate it and love it. You guys, what's your take on this? What do you think is essential to keep our industry alive? From your point of view.
We have a lot of strength in our history, in the foundation of how we started. So I think that if we keep, you know, innovating with respect to the traditional foundation of watchmaking, how certain pieces are made, you know, how much time we give to polishing a bevel, or so, you know, all these things are interesting, and I don't think we should ever discard those. Another strength that we have is in our application of materials. I mean, there's a synergy, or there's a synonymous aspect between a lot of things that are coming out in this digital age. You know, a lot of the things, they look, feel, seem, they feel the same. You know, they act the same. With mechanical watchmaking, we have the advantage of presenting materials in a new way. So as long as I think we continue to innovate and try to figure out how to present these very familiar items in very new ways, how can we come up with new finishes for certain things, I think we'll always be able to continue to evolve the idea of mechanical art and present something new. But our strength is in our core history, and we got to lean on that and figure out how to evolve that and keep it fresh in a way that honors tradition without losing, you know, that fabric, without losing how it started. You know?
Yeah. Do you agree with that, Hamdan? Do you have a different take?
Even though there's watchmakers or artists going on the same direction, but what will keep it going are being different on the same direction. Even though they want to take the same direction, but they have to be slightly different. And we humans are emotional. This as well will keep it going. Today, we're wearing our father's watches, and our sons will wear our watches, and it will keep on going. Today, you pass a painting or a Persian carpet or an amber stone to the next generation, and it will be more useful and more valuable. But will a smartwatch be as valuable or as useful? Yeah.
As they say, you never really own a fine mechanical timepiece. To paraphrase a good friend of ours.
Like an art piece.
Exactly, something you can pass on.
You never own it.
Now, at this point, I'm going to open up the floor to questions if anyone has any. Is there someone standing by with microphones by any chance? So, like, yes. Hello, James. Good to see you. How are you doing?
So far, so good.
Yes.
We all agree that watches are that amazing combination of art and technology. But what is discussed is the other role they play, that they're a social signifier. That you wear a watch because what it says about you, and the image you want to project to people you meet.
We've sort of touched on it slightly because a mechanical watch is an expression of self-identity, but that's kind of taking it a step further. Not just self-identity, but who you want to identify in the eyes of others. Is there someone in particular you want to address the question to, or?
I think they all have a view.
Right, who wants to bite?
I'll go ahead. I think you have a valid point there, but most of the watch buyers would go for something that would show what they have. Whereas a watch collector would not necessarily look at a product that is recognizable right away, but rather look at the content of the watch. If Hamdan, you can agree with me on this.
Exactly.
So you can have a watch that is not known as a collector, but it might be a tourbillon with a full face so that you wouldn't even know that it's an expensive watch. A person who doesn't understand watch would think it's a Daniel Wellington because it looks plain.
God forbid.
Yes. But then you have, on the other hand, the watch buyers who would go for brands that are very known. You can know it from a mile away. And they would go for that watch because they want to be known that they got this watch, or this watch was a difficult piece to get, or they had to pay a high premium to get this watch, and then people would recognize, oh, he's driving a Rolls Royce, he's wearing the X watch that is very difficult to get with a 25 years waiting list, or whatever it is, you know. So you have the two different types of people, I would say.
I agree. There's the discreet who would wait for a watch for a year and or 6 years and not caring about people knowing what this watch or what the content of the watch is, or other people, as you mentioned, who would rather wear a Rolex with a full baguette diamond, a presentable watch.
Yeah, no, that's really cool actually, because actually the three of you guys, which would you prefer? Like, you know, would you wear something that people come up to you and say, I know that guy, I love his work? Or would you want someone to come up to you and say, I've never seen that before, tell me more?
I would wear something I like.
Yeah.
Good answer.
I wouldn't
Good answer.
wear something because, well, if in my situation, it will be difficult to wear something hot because then everyone will say, why the hell you're wearing it and we're not getting it. So better avoid that.
Yeah. What about you guys, Aldis?
You know, my watch choices, again, they represent me. I typically, so I began purchasing watches specific to the watchmaker because of what that watchmaker taught me or how they influenced me. There are certain grail watches, you know, independent watches that I really can't wait to get my hands on. There are certain grail watches that are within bigger brands, you know. But for me, as long as it represents or says something about me, which is to go left when everybody else is going right, it becomes more personal to me. I think there are a few collections that straddle the line. You know, I think like maybe for this generation, I think the Abdulmagied Royal Oak is sort of this generation's, you know, presidential, right? A lot of people know it, a lot of people want it for varied reasons. You have people that want it because it's purely popular, commercialized in such a way where you can't help but know what it is. And then you have people that want the Royal Oak because Gerald Genta designed it, and they understand the legacy and the history. So it's kind of hard to compute what the real point is. It really comes down to the person. But for me, again, coming down to me personally, I buy things that I want to be able to tell you the story about. If you, sometimes you know them, sometimes you don't. I'm impressed sometimes when people are like, hey, I know what that is because it's such and such. And I'm like, you did your research.
Yeah.
You did your homework.
You know your stuff.
But I want to have a conversation, again, not about the monetary financial value of it, about the artistic value of it, because I feel like it's a representation of myself. So, you know.
Interesting. I'm going to bring a little bit of audience participation into this, actually, because I'm actually interested in the outcome of this. Like, you know, show of hands, like obviously between like the watches that people recognize and the watches that you want to tell people about, which do you wear more often? Hands up, the people who wear more recognizable watches. Jesus, really? No,
Don't be scared.
I mean, I'm wearing a Daytona, so my hands up.
No
Seriously,
wrong
just
answers
3
here.
people? Okay, so like people, okay, I guess we've got like a sort of disproportionate amount of independent watch brands in here, so I guess that's kind of... So, okay, that was a bad question.
Raise your hand.
Yeah, you know, I admitted that was not a considered question. Right, any other questions from the audience, please? Gentleman in the front, do you require a microphone? Dominic's got one.
Hi, Susan. So we talked today about the smartwatch and the impact it may have on the industry.
Sorry, it's very
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, so we spoke about the smartwatch and the impact it may have on the industry. If I may, I'd like to also bring in the impact that we're seeing from the grey market and also from e-commerce today. In many respects, it seems easier to communicate, but also harder. And what I mean by that is it's easier to advertise, but it's more challenging to really communicate a story in detail. So, and if you look at e-commerce platforms now, they're buying watches, and quite sophisticated watches with algorithms. So I guess the question I have is, what does the brands and the retailers and the independents need to do to mitigate these challenges? So e-commerce, grey market.
That's a hot question. And I would like to say that at this point in time, like, you know, you see a lot of brands taking control of their pre-owned market, actually, and that's, you know, you could say a response.
Yes. Well, as a retailer, the grey market is always a threat. And we've been seeing it growing heavily worldwide. And in terms of grey market, I'm talking about new pieces being sold at premiums, not vintage pieces or old pieces. difficult to control, affects the retailers worldwide because what is not available with the retailer is always available in the gray market, most probably and most of the time with a very high premium. Source of the watch stolen, leaked from other agents, does it have the papers? All of this is always under question, and not all consumers would go for that option. E-commerce, on the other hand, is being supported heavily by a lot of the brands that are represented under groups, whereas the independent brands and my two friends here can support me. Would you buy a Group of Force or a Richard Mille from online?
Definitely not.
I think people still want the personal touch when it comes to expensive watches, and they would like to have the experience of buying the watch, talking to an individual rather than talking to their computer.
Well, see, yes and no. I don't think it's an either-or situation, if you don't mind me saying, because it's possible to experience the watch in person but make the purchase online.
Yeah.
They're not, you know.
It could happen as well. But again, if you find something on the online that is
They're complementary in a way.
60, 70% cheaper because it's discontinued, because people are not appreciating the brand, but you as a person, you like it, you know, go for it. But
No, it's interesting because we're talking about the grey market here as a response to actual consumer wants. And as a collector, Hamdan, I mean, you don't have to name any names, but when you talk to your fellow collectors and all that, what are the kinds of conversations that you're having about, like, you know, pieces that you can't necessarily find, but you might be able to look in other channels and find them there?
There, of course, the grey market is a threat to retailers, and when they cannot find, there are some people who wouldn't mind paying premium for a piece, and crazily premium, you know, and unfortunately, which does not make sense. Sometimes they would pay double the price. It does not make sense at all. But I believe eventually this will stay, and it's going to be wavy. It will go down. It will decrease, but it will go up again. It will decrease. It will have to decrease, and it will increase again. It will always stay there.
But again, coming to the point with the grey market, it's always targeting the watch buyers, not collectors, because
Which is why their environments aren't super qualitative if you look online.
yes. And it's always for the hot pieces that are in demand, and
Exactly. A collector would want to meet to interact with the watchmaker. He would want to be there, ask questions, know more about what he's buying. Exactly, go to the factory.
So I guess the question we need to be focusing on is how do you transition these people who are from one side looking purely for a product into people who can actually appreciate the finer points of it. I think that's something that we all need to think about. Any other questions from the floor, please? Stefano, please. If you can wait 2 seconds for Dominic to bring you the microphone, it'll be clearer. Pass it down.
So talking about design, my question here, but today we are very lucky because we have some very creative people like Aldis, I never met before, but he's very brilliant. Hello. We have Aurélie, we have Steven, we have Edouard, with very different profiles. Of course, we comes from a past, so we still talk about Jaragenta, who was a genius. But my question is, with such brilliant new designers, what will be the next step in maybe a field where we'll still keep going and talking about most of the best sellers in the market have been designed by people 50 years ago or 60 years ago, and what is your perspective in terms of innovation, in terms of new designs coming in the future?
Aldis, I think this is right up your alley. You want to take it?
Really?
Yeah. Here's the ball. Catch.
So my philosophy for myself as a designer, innovator in any sense is how can I be the answer to the unasked question? A lot of times things are given to us and we find dependence on them, not realizing 2-3 years ago, well, I didn't know I wanted this so bad. I didn't know I needed this so bad, right? So how can I find ways to give people a different experience, visceral experience with the product that they aren't getting yet? And then also, how can I contribute something to my field in terms of watchmaking that becomes innovation of materials, innovation of how to apply indications, mechanical advancements, all this wrapped up into the experience I want to give the consumer, because you are selling an experience. I want you to buy me, my DNA. The whole process of buying the watch has to be something you remember for the rest of your life. Hence why we would like to go into the store and talk to the watchmakers, and so in terms of the future, it's hard to say, because like art, the success is, I don't want to say it's unquantifiable, but some things take off that you just don't realize. And it could be something as simple as adding a new angle to a case, and people are like, oh my God, it's the hottest thing ever, and then you kind of hedge your bets and see what people like. So you got two options. Either you continue that trend and try to repeat that in different ways, or you say, okay, this is what it is, that's great, it's been done. Why was it so successful? You study that history of that success to a fervent extent, and then you say, that did well because of this. What's missing? Mm-hmm. Okay, this is missing. I haven't seen this. This is how I design. I literally design things that manufacturers tell me, brother, this is not possible. Stop it. And I'm like, not possible yet. We might have to defy the laws of physics, but hey, that's our challenge. But I think it all comes down to what new experiences, how can we help people experience time telling differently? Mm-hmm. What is it about that where you say, I got this because of boom, 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 boom. This is different. I've never seen this before. I've never been exposed to this. And it's a compilation of elements. Mm-hmm. Definitely material choice, definitely mechanical composition, set application as well. But it is really hard to pinpoint that next thing that's just going to strike lightning. We just got to keep trying. Yeah. But it all comes down to information at the end of the day. And almost understanding that means studying behavioral patterns in people more than studying the actual watch. I can do anything with the watch. I can always project what the watch is going to do or what I want it to do. I can't predict people that way. So when I study the familial patterns and understand what engages them, it helps inform how I'm going to present myself to them.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very important take on design as a concept, because what you said, that design is the answer to an unasked question. I think that's something that we need to kind of get our minds around, because design is not just an aesthetic thing.
Right.
It's when you look at the word design, it speaks about purpose and intention. If you say something was done by design, it's very purposeful, it's deliberate. And now, I kind of want to ask the two of you guys, Hamdan and Mohammed, when's the last time you actually saw a design that made you think, this is new, this is fresh, that really excited you in that way, and what was it?
I think Mohammed would agree. MB&F and Orwick. Mm-hmm. MB&F and Orwick. And they did not only made good designs, but good work, good mechanisms, beautiful watches that they did. I believe it was very brave to do such designs. Mm-hmm. And now recently people started interacting properly with those designs in a positive way. Mm-hmm. MB&F and Orwick, I believe they did good work.
Sure. Yeah. Anything to add, Mohammed?
I think also I would add Richard Mille to make the modern tonneau shape, the comeback of a modern tonneau shape in the early 2000s was also a breakthrough in the design. A lot of brands tried to recreate the tonneau shape again after Richard Mille, but with no success. And I think it was just the way he designed it, how it fits on the wrist. It just worked.
Yeah, it's just a particular combination of
Yes,
factors.
yes.
I think we have time for a couple more questions. We've got like a ton of journalists in the room. Like, let's have some questions. Paul, Mike, let's pass it down if we can. Take it away.
Thank you, Suzanne. You raised a number of very pertinent questions and a lot of relevant points in your moderation, particularly about targeting a younger audience, a new demographic. How do we anticipate customers' needs? And maybe if I could take a next step, it seems to me that one of the questions we're asking is how can we make watchmaking cool for a younger generation or for the next generation? It strikes me that we have really the person to do that sitting on the stage in front of us, having heard what he says and having seen his background, Aldis, and also the other members of the panel. A simple question, does the watch industry need more people like Aldis?
Wow.
Well, I'm going to just go ahead and say yes. All right. I like that question. It's the favorite question of the night. All right.
Yeah. 5 stars.
No, I mean, so I have a passion for education because I believe education is the open door to opportunity, regardless of your situation. I speak to kids all the time and I tell them that you are not a product of your environment. Your environment is a product of you. And, you know, my mom gave me this because of where we were, where she pulled us out of. And for me, the idea is to figure out how to give that back. So a couple of reasons why I started a company and a couple of real goals. You know, the first major reason was legacy. I want to create sustainable legacy for my family. It's not about money, it's about giving opportunity. Continuous opportunity down the line is something to hold, to care of, be proud of, you know. But beyond that, I want to also sort of have a conduit for charitable contribution, because I would love to be able to establish at some point, you know, scholarships in our name. But beyond that, I wanted summer programs where I bring inner city kids at, you know, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to, you know, 16, 17. Give them a summer where they're sitting there engineering, working on the CNC tools, working with their hands, because a lot of these kids have the interest, they just don't have the outlet, and they don't have the they don't have a conducive environment to their success that's going to support that, right? Now, regardless of whether they become watchmakers or not, it's not the point. The point is to acknowledge and inspire the potential of their future. They're always going to have some sort of tie to watchmaking, because, you know, we sought to support that, but it's about education. And they can go do whatever they want with that engineering knowledge, because there's so many different avenues. But I feel like if, you know, we, and I say we collectively as the watch industry, or you know, even with the bigger conglomerates, the groups, invest in the idea of educating and better, you know, furthering the future potential of these kids. You know, there's so many different places. You know, I live in California, so many different places there, so many different places in New York, Chicago, all over the U.S., all over the world, really, where these kids could benefit greatly. Enriching our future secures our foundation. That is not the point. It's not about securing us, but I mean it secures the thinker in terms of their relationship with the idea of innovation. And when it comes down to it, we represent innovation at its core. And that's what we want to do, is continue that sort of, I don't want to say it's a trend, we want to continue that habit. We want people to habitually be innovative. But it does come down to, what are you contributing to said society? And if we start with the kids and give them something, acknowledge them and show them that we understand you have this potential for education, let's put you there. They'll understand how to take us from where we are to the whole next generation of design that we can't even fathom at this point.
Okay. Guys, it's almost 12:30, so one last question, because it's nearly lunchtime. I don't know about you guys, I'm Asian, I want my food. Sorry, Fiona, Barbara.
I'll let Fiona go ahead.
very noble urge. Maybe, well, rock, paper, scissors. Go on, Barbara.
Hi. I'm gonna piggyback a little bit on Paul's and maybe just add this a little. Mohammed, I was honored enough to attend Dubai Watch Week last year, and one of the things that I found so amazing and intriguing, and John and I spoke about this today, was your children's program that you did. It inspired me. I've actually written a watch-related children's book, which was released at Basel this year. And that is an initiative of mine, is as a parent of 2 young children, teaching them more about the ins and outs. And I think Aldis and I, we even kind of talked about this a little bit today. Kind of what Paul said, here you have a show like, I'll use Basel World as an example, where people are actually allowed to bring their children in. Even where's the idea of set up a camp, a class, something like you guys did? I mean, do you think that there are opportunities for places, like Christie's, to do a little kids department? And I don't mean little kids even necessarily, but 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, where you can get them before we lose them to this, so to speak. If we have lost them already.
This already, so it's
I mean, because here's the thing: we've lost millennials. We can't. There's no, they're gone. But we have Gen Z, and they are the influenced generation. They're influenced. They can. If you get them young, we're watching them grow up. I'm raising them right now. Do you think whether it's brands or trade shows or retailers could be doing more to reach them so that 20 years from now they become Aldis?
Well, I love that. It's something that's not depending on us as retailers or Christie's. It's really the parents. If the parents want to take their kids to that direction, obviously us as retailers, we should support that. And that's the initiative Christie's and the team from Dubai Watch Week. And I would give a special thanks to my cousin Hind to initiate this. And it wasn't targeting the kids of the family of Seddiqi only. It was all the kids in Dubai that family wanted to come and enjoy the Watch Week. They would come and sit there and get a little bit of background about watches, about auctions, how to auction, and all of this. It opens a new gateway to them. But again, if a family member is coming to attend the Watch Week and would say, listen, kids, stay home, this is your iPad, that's the mistake of the parent. But if they say, listen, we're going to somewhere where you would see something new and some watches, why don't you come? And they end up coming there and seeing a children's section, that's an added point. So I think it's something that goes both ways. And congratulations on the book. We have to get them.
Yes. Guys, it is to my eternal regret that I have to wrap this up, because I feel like this could go on for some time. But, stick around. There's still more discussions happening later in the day. And it's lunchtime. Thank you so much to my panel, Mohammed, Hamdan, and Aldis, and to you, our audience, and watching online as well.